All right. It's been a really long day. I played two really hard-fought games today. The first game I played today was super long, as you can see by the notation. Let me hide it just to avoid any spoiler. But yeah, I didn't have time to record a recap after this game because I had to quickly eat lunch and then prepare for my next one. So I think what I'll do is record both recaps right now, but I'll have them in separate videos. So for this one, I'll share the game I played against Jacob Templen Grave, a candidate master from Norway. And he's actually, I think, a longtime viewer of my content. He told me after the game that he's been watching for many years, and we've played a decent amount online, actually. I found his Chess account yesterday in preparation for this game, and we've played, I think, about 10 times. So I knew going into the game that he's a pretty avid Caro Kann player, and I prepared a really tricky line, starting with two knights attack. Now, I do have a video on YouTube called How to Crush the Caro Kann, in which I recommend the two knights attack and show a lot of like cool tricks and traps. But the line that we went into in this game is a very deep sort of gambit. And it starts with the main theory, h3, takes. This is all very standard, bishop e2, main line, e6, castle. And there's different ways the position can branch out. Black could take, black could play knight d7. But he played, I think, what's the second most common move, bishop to c5. But very logical move, just developing and preventing me from playing pawn d4. So I was still in prep, and I played the move rook to d1, preparing pawn d4 to try and get tempo on the bishop. And then he blitzed out bishop to d4. And I knew that he's had this position before online. And I had this position on my computer right before the game, and I was preparing what I played in the game, queen to f4. And at first, this looks like a slightly mysterious move because, okay, what is the queen doing on f4? But I'm aligning with the bishop, and I'm threatening to either play e5 or take on d5 and hit the bishop. And if black plays pawn e5, I can simply move back and hit g7. And there's some argument that e5 loosens the center a little bit for black. So after queen f4, he took the knight, and I'm actually losing a pawn here because after takes, white is now down a pawn. But again, this is all pre-game prep. In compensation for being down a pawn, I have the bishop pair, and I have a bit of initiative, especially after my next move, rook to b1. And I knew that he had this position once online, and he encountered bishop to a3, which is other kind of main option for white. But rook b1 is a top engine move, and for about maybe an hour before the game, I was reviewing a lot of the engine lines from this position. And Stockfish will give a slight plus for white, but the position is very complicated, and it's hard to understand, and a lot of lines require accurate play. Now, the sad thing which happened here is he played a move that I did not look at beforehand. I was prepared for queen e7, pawn b5, and queen d6. Thought these were the main three moves, and I had pretty extensive preparation against each of these moves. But he played a logical looking move, which for some reason I didn't look at, was his pawn to b6. And I was just upset with myself when he played this, because I should have at least looked at this before the game. Now, it does seem like pawn b6 is very similar to pawn b5, but there are some small nuances. Against pawn b5, I had a cool line prepared, which I'll just go ahead and show, is bishop a3, queen f6, and then queen c7, losing f2, but after king to h1, white's threatening mate, and I think white's already substantially better because knight d7 would be forced, and then I take, and then b5 is hanging. But unfortunately, with pawn to b6, that's what happened in the game, he has some additional options. After I play bishop a3, he right away plays c5. Doesn't go for queen f6, but just blocks my bishop on a3. And I was on my own here. But I knew some of the kind of standard plans. Generally, white wants to try and open the position with either c4 or pawn d4. I also knew another very common idea. The move I ended up playing is bishop to f3, just challenging the knight on e4. Now, it turns out that bishop f3 was a small mistake. What I should have done was recognize that even though black has closed off one diagonal, another diagonal is open. And there's a nice sequence here, which I did check after the game, is bishop to b5, forcing knight d7, and then c4. Really nice move. And even though black gets to castle, there's takes, and bishop c6. And I probably should have at least been aware of this during the game. And maybe if I saw this idea, like combining bishop b5 and c4, perhaps I would have went for it. But didn't go into that. I played bishop f3 because in a lot of other lines I was looking at before the game, bishop f3 was one of the main moves. And it makes sense, just aligning a lot of things on the long diagonal. But then he plays knight g5. And it gets a little bit awkward. Even though the knight looks weird on g5, he just wants to simplify and get rid of my bishop. So from here, I leave the bishop on f3 and play d4, trying to create some distraction. And I really want to make my bishop on a3 useful. So d4 is a way to do that. But then he plays queen f6. And then from here, things start getting pretty concrete. I have to respond to this move. Of course, my queen's attacked. And I was thinking that if I moved back, then he would just take and my structure would be ruined. So I decided to trade queens. And even though I'm still down a pawn, I thought there's still compensation because I have this move bishop to h5. And this is a weird looking square for the bishop, but I had ideas of later playing rook e1 and then exploiting the fact that f-pawn is pinned. And the dream is to eventually capture on e6. But as we're going to see, things get a little bit messy after knight to e4, threatening to take on c3 and fork my rooks. I play rook e1, leave the c-pawn hanging, and he didn't take it, just to show if he does take it, then I would play rook b3. If I take right away, I don't think this works because king d7. But my plan was rook b3, and when the knight moves, I play f3. And if the knight moves to defend the pawn, I play h4 and just trap the knight. So I'm pretty sure the pawn on c3 is poison. And yeah, for that reason, he played knight to d7, which I think was a very useful move, just solidifying c5. And from here, I still went ahead and played f3, trying to create play on the e-file. But then after knight d2, rook d1, knight c4, he was able to optimize the knight and still make threats, this time attacking the bishop. After I moved back, then he castled. Now, one thing I want to share before we go forward in the game, I was considering a crazy line here, pawn takes c5, sacrificing the bishop. But during the game, I couldn't make it work. Like after takes, I wanted to go for this, takes, and if king f8, I would play this, hitting the knight, and if knight takes, and this is kind of what I was calculating, and white is winning another pawn here because these two pawns are hanging. But I didn't think there was enough compensation for the piece. Let me check real quick with the engine because I'm curious. Is this playable for white? Nah, black is for choice. We go back even further. Oh, that's interesting. The engine just says, for a moment, castling was a top move, but knight a3 also much better for black. I haven't checked this game extensively with the engine, so there are some moments where I'm very curious to see what Stockfish will say. So let me show what happened. Bishop c1 was played, and then he castled. And for some reason, when I had calculated to this line, bishop c1 castling, I thought that black could be in trouble here because of the idea bishop h6, rook moves, and now white has a plan of lifting the rook over to g3. And because the king can't move back to the center, there are situations where this can be very bad for black. Also, the king is tied down to defending the f-pawn. So when I saw this position from a distance, I thought it seems like white has good chances. Oh man, my voice is dry. Let me get some water. I'll be right back. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so it seems like in this position, white has good chances, even though I'm still down a pawn. But then the more I thought, the more I realized that I'm actually in some trouble here, because black has a very strong idea knight d6 to f5. And I just don't have time to get my rook to g3, because when the knight comes to f5, not only does it prevent rook g3, but it hits the bishop. And at this moment, I realized my gambit went terribly wrong because I'm down a pawn and I didn't really see any compensation. So around here, I think I played f4 and offered a draw, because I realized the position is about to get really bad. And yeah, he immediately just declined the draw and played knight d6. And now, yeah, my bishops look a little bit ridiculous. I saw a comment in the Chess chat after the game saying, why would you like get the bishop pair for 2 knights and then just put the bishops on the edge of the board where they do nothing? And it was really a result of misjudgment and not realizing that my attack just doesn't work. But I didn't want to give up. And at this point, I really wanted to make the position as messy as possible. So I went ahead and played pawn to g4. And it's ugly because I'm blocking both my bishops. Now they're both stuck. But I do prevent knight to f5. And I have ideas of playing f5 or g5, and there's still dreams of bringing the rook to g2, playing g5, taking, and then doing some windmill checkmates. But it's very far off in fantasy world. So things continue from here. Pawn takes pawn, and then I play pawn f5, just trying to make things crazy. And we can see that by this timestamps, I'm a bit lower on time, but still, okay, we both have enough time. Like, we're not in severe time pressure just yet. And then he actually took a long time here. He took 18 minutes to play knight to e4. But I think this is a really good move because it just establishes a really strong outpost on e4, blocks my rook, essentially defends the pawn. And yeah, he's taking his time before capturing a pawn on the c-file. On top of everything, he has ideas of knight g3. So I was not feeling good here. I took on d4, and then he plays knight e5. And we can see here that the knights are just so much better than the bishops. My bishop's just on the edge, knight's in the center. He's threatening a triple fork. My c-pawn is hanging multiple ways. But I still had hope, and I played pawn to g5, which both defends the f3 square, so preventing the triple fork, and also just trying to bust things open on the g-file and get some sort of counterplay. And then he takes on c3. I play h4, and actually when he takes on c3, this is a massive threat. And at this point, I thought I was just on the verge of losing. H4 was kind of a last-ditch effort to not get skewered on the h-file. But then he plays rook h3 anyway, and I still have problems with my things on the h-file. So I went ahead and took the pawn on e6, trying to just open the center a little bit. And then he surprised me. Instead of taking back on e6, which I think is probably the most natural and probably one of the best moves, he took the pawn on h4. And at first this looks fine for black because it hits the bishop on h5. But I think he missed my resource in this position. I don't actually have to take the pawn on f7. I mean, he was probably calculating takes, and then my bishop gets stuck on h6 in the very end. But after rook h4, this allows pawn to e7. And I'm essentially saying, oh no, my bishop, but I'm getting a really strong pawn that's on the verge of promoting, because next move I want to take, which would simultaneously threaten rook d8 and taking the knight. So he told me after the game that at some point in this recap, I should mention the phrase grave mistake, because he has grave in his name. So I think rook h4, rook takes h4 was a very grave mistake. And actually, I think just lost most of the advantage. But after pawn to e7, the game is really just beginning, and we're not even close to the whole story of this game. So let's go forward. He plays knight c6. And I'm still on the back foot because my rook is hit, my pawn is hanging, my bishop is hanging. It still looks not so great for white, but after takes, I play rook to d7, and I'm just in time to counterattack. I'm able to leave my bishop hanging, and then all of a sudden there's threats on against both knights, and there's also pressure against f7. So I was feeling like I'm on the verge of just coming back here. But then he found I think a nice way to keep an advantage after takes. I take on e4, and then he takes on g5. And for some reason during the game, I did not consider this move. I mean, we were already like both pretty low on time. I was anticipating this move, knight to f5. And there's actually a funny line here. I think knight f5 is not a good move because it allows rook takes a7. And if he takes the rook, then I mate him on the back rank. And if he moves his rook, my plan was actually just to keep attacking his rook. If rook d8, rook d7. If rook c8, rook c7. And I thought this would be a funny way to draw, just keep harassing the rook. And the rook can't really access these two squares. So I think this is just a draw. But yeah, we didn't go into that because he took on g5. And I think I didn't realize how dangerous this move still was, because after takes, it looks like I'm out of danger, even though I'm still down 2 pawns. My rooks are hyperactive on the 7th rank. But black is still able to play for a win here because I don't have perpetual. The rook guards h7. So he plays a5, and it's not easy to win the queenside pawns because they're defended. So I went ahead and played rook g7. He played king h8, and I was falling pretty low on time. I think I took a lot of time on my next move because I really wanted to keep my rooks on the 7th. But the problem is if I just play a waiting move, like let's say king g2, he's ready to play rook g8. And if I keep my rooks as is, then he starts pushing. And this rook is actually really useful, helping guide the g-pawn. I think I would be in trouble here. Sorry, I'm getting a call. Let me turn down this call and finish the recap first. Sorry, friend who's calling me. But yeah, let me show what happens. So I realized that rook g8 is a threat, and if I want to take the g-pawn, now is my only chance. I take on g5, but this allows rook g8, and he trades off a pair of rooks, and now it's black, the only one who can play for a win, up a clean pawn. And then I play rook b7. I wanted to keep the king cut off on the 8th rank. He plays rook c6. I play a3. And around here, I thought it was going to be an easy draw because after he takes, I don't have to take immediately. If I take immediately, he wins this pawn, and then I'm going to be down 2 pawns. But I realize I have a very clever move here. Rook b8 check. And the king doesn't really have great shelter. For king f7, I check again. And the king will either have to move up to the 6th rank, and then I take the pawn with check, or he moves towards my rook, and then I can consider taking on h7. So what happened is after king to e8, I decided first to take on b6, and after rook c3, I am losing the pawn, but I'm winning the h-pawn. So at this point, I thought it was going to be an easy draw, but man, was I wrong. Because after takes, I play king f2. I'm taking time before I take back the pawn because I want to get my king to stop the a-pawn. And then after a4, king e2, rook a1, king d2, we got to a position which I should note I was super low on time. So I was pretty sure in the moment this is drawn, but king d2 was actually a very grave mistake. And it allows black a really beautiful winning idea here, which he did miss in the game. He played pawn a3. The winning move for black, I believe it's only one winning move, is to play rook g1. And the idea is if I take the pawn, if I don't take the pawn and move the king, the rook is going to go to g7, then a7, and that will be winning for black. So pretty much I have to take the pawn, my last chance. And then he plays a3, and when I try and stop the pawn, a2 happens. And he's threatening to queen. I can't take it because rook g2, and my king is just far away enough where this is losing for white. And if I try to stop it with the king, just again, a2 and a1 is coming. So there was a missed opportunity for black when I played king d2. And interestingly enough, the only drawing move, as far as I know here, is king d3. Getting the king off the second rank, and now if rook g1, I can go into the same line, rook h7, a3, rook here, and there's not the same skewer trick because my king is not on the second rank, and this would be a draw. Now, I'm not threatening to take the pawn right away, but I just want to play king c2. And if a2, then I take. So I hope that makes sense. Goes to show that even very simplified endgames like this can still be very complex, and even title players can make very grave mistakes in these endgames. So let me show what happened in the game, because it's still really just heating up. Rook g1 was a missed win, or a3 was a missed win. He should have played rook g1. And I played king to c2. And again, at this point, I thought it was going to be a draw, but then he plays a2, king b2, and then he plays rook b1. And I'm realizing that I have to take the pawn, otherwise he queens. And then rook b7, and my king is cut off. It's as far away from his pass pawn as it can be. And he's ready to try and harass my rook and start pushing the pawn. And at this point, I still felt like there was enough for white to draw, but I wasn't sure. So let me just show what happens. I play king a3, just waiting. He moves to f8. I was anticipating king g7, so I move back. He plays king g7, give a check. We repeat a little bit, and then he plays king to h8. So he still wants to advance the pawn. I stop it from advancing. And then we do a little bit more dancing. And then he plays this move. And this is actually a really nice move because he has a plan of king g7, check, king comes up, I keep checking. And then when I attack the pawn again, his rook is ready to come behind. And at this point, I thought I was in trouble because my king is so far away and his king is actually in good position to harass my rook. And it looks like his pawn is going to come down. And it seems like I'm not in time. But yeah, let me show what happens. I play rook h6. I blockade the pawn. The only way for him to remove my rook is to go back to g5 with the king. And now I have time to run back. And now it's a race. I really want to get my king as close as possible before he starts pushing. So he plays king g5, I move back, plays h5, I run with my king, or walk with my king. Only so much you can do move by move. King g4, king d2, king f3, he's trying to shoulder me out. And now if I play this move, wait, did I play that move? No, I give a check. If I play this move, I thought that h4 would happen if I come back. I wasn't sure what was happening here. Like, I was terrified of something like this where maybe it's still a draw. I don't know. Anyway, I didn't play king e1. I give a check. He plays king g2, and I move back. So now I'm trying to check from behind. And he plays h4. I check, keep checking. And at this point, the only shelter for the king is in front of the pawn. And once he moves in front of the pawn, I was just kind of breathing a sigh of relief because my king can come in. And I start here with rook f7, ensuring that when I move my king to the f-file, there is no checks to chase me away. After rook to g8, I play king f2, and then he plays h2, and I play king f1. And then actually something interesting happened at the very end because he offered me a draw here, but usually the proper way to offer a draw is you make a move and then offer the draw. But he offered me a draw and his clock was still ticking. And I didn't want to accept it, even though, like, okay, I can't really win this. But the reason why I didn't want to accept it is because there's a funnier way to draw this, which I was upset he didn't do. And eventually I just took his draw offer, even though it was still his turn. But the funniest way to draw this position is for black to play rook g1, king f2, and then rook f1, and then say, oh no, my rook, and then stalemate. So it could have finished like this. This was the final position. The game was a draw. And yeah, I don't know what to make of this game. I think there were a lot of grave mistakes throughout the game, especially in the end game. Um, if I had more time, probably at some point in the future, I'm gonna have to sit down and just learn all these table-based positions. Oh, Black was winning with h4. So one cool thing about Lichess, any position with 7 pieces or less is basically solved, and you can ask table base what the wins are, or what the valuation is. So anyway, I think this recap is almost at the half-hour mark. If you want to analyze this game on your own or any of my games, I will leave a link in the description to the live broadcast where you can see all the games from this tournament. But I'm tired. This is such a long game. I still have one more recap to record for today. So thanks for watching. Oh, one more thing. I wanted to promote the merch. I was wearing this hoodie during the game, and he was wearing a chess bra hoodie. And I realized during the game, I should run a sale for merch. So if you're watching this within like the first week of it being uploaded, you can use coupon code Norway for 15% off all Oh No My Queen merch and everything in the merch store. I'll leave a link in the description. If you've been enjoying these recaps, maybe get yourself a hoodie, or maybe get yourself a shirt. Hopefully I remember to not edit in me almost taking off all my clothes. But okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next recap.